I urge our leaders, especially Prime Minister Mark Carney, to act in line with the message of his own book. In it, he argues that we must place human dignity and shared moral commitments above markets, politics, and power.
The humanitarian crisis in Gaza has reached unimaginable levels, and we now have Canadian doctors coming out calling on Prime Minister Mark Carney to do more. So in this video, I'm going to play a few clips from their recent press conference that was hosted by NDP MP foreign critic Heather McPherson, and just break down the what is going on and how we have continued as a society to allow this sort of mass genocide without any real pushback, apart from some strongly worded statements, which, again, is not nearly enough. So let me just quickly here give you an overview or a bird's eye view of the numbers of what is happening. And it's worth noting, again, there is no real infrastructure currently in Gaza to really account for the actual numbers in terms of deaths, in terms of injuries. There is no real accounting at this point. That the actual ability to follow what has been going on closely ended about a year ago. So at this point, a lot of it is estimates or whatever numbers the UN is able to put together based on their sources. But again, these numbers are not a complete picture of what is going on, but it's worth sharing regardless. They write here, the aggression has transformed Gaza into a landscape of desolation where nearly half of the casualties are children and thousands remain displaced. The group of experts cited over 52,000 deaths, of which 70% continue to be women and children, and over 118,000 injuries as of May 4th, 2025. Other estimates put the deaths well over 100,000. So again, it's hard to know the exact figures. That said, Canada, along with many other countries, are simply not doing enough. Now, I covered this recent statement from Mark Carney, the UK, and France a few days ago, but I just want to highlight what Mark Carney is saying so far, just to give you an idea of where the pushback is from the NDP and these doctors. So part of the statement, he says, we call on the Israeli government to stop its military operations in Gaza and immediately allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. This must include engaging with the UN to ensure a return to delivery of aid in line with humanitarian principles. All right, that's a great thing to ask for. Where is the pressure point? What are you using in terms of your ability to put pressure on the Israeli government to stop what they are doing? So that's where we get to what the NDP and these doctors are calling for. But I also want to point out, he wrote here, or I should say, this joint statement between the three countries writes here, the Israeli government's denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable and risks breaching international humanitarian law. Risks breaching international humanitarian law? The Israeli government has been flagrantly violating international humanitarian law since well before October 7th when it applies to the ongoing settlements, which they have continued, and I'll get to a headline later on, continued to expand. Let me get to NDP MP Foreign Affairs critic Heather McPherson.
This is the defining moral issue of our time. As you know, New Democrats have long called on the Canadian government to end its complicity in this genocide. The time for statements is over. Long past time for action. Strong political and moral choices that will put pressure on Netanyahu to end this. We demand an arms embargo, sanctions on Netanyahu and his cabinet, and the immediate recognition of the State of Palestine.
An arms embargo, sanctions, and a recognition of the State of Palestine. In addition to, the NDP also called on Mark Carney to suspend the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, which would be right in line with what the UK is doing. They suspended talks with Israel over the attacks. And the EU is also in reviewing their trade cooperation with Israel. And Ireland actually just recently moved to become the first EU country to ban trade with Israeli-occupied territories. So that regards the illegal Israeli settlements on Palestinian land. Now, that is continuing to expand. So, this headline, by the way, is just remarkable to me. Israel announces major expansion of settlements in occupied West Bank. The word illegal should be before settlements, because any average person who hasn't followed this closely may not think much of this headline until they read the piece, which does explain how these settlements are illegal under international law. But you read this headline and it's just, oh, okay, they're expanding settlements. What's the big deal here? The reality is this has been going on for years. I mean, look at the date on this one, 2016. This is from the UN. Israel's settlements have no legal validity, constitute flagrant violation of international law. So again, they've been doing this, of course, well before October 7th. And you see in that the statement from Mark Carney in France and the UK, we oppose any attempt to expand settlements in the West Bank. They've been doing this for over a decade, for years. To act like this is like, I'm glad they oppose any attempts to expand settlements, but again, without using any pressure point in terms of the political pressure you're able to use in terms of sanctions, in terms of ending trade, without those sorts of moves, these strongly worded statements do absolutely nothing. Now, here are a few clips from the doctors that have worked in Gaza that spoke at this news conference.
I was home already on May 13th when my hospital, the European Gaza hospital, was attacked with numerous Israeli airstrikes, which put the hospital out of service, killed and injured around 60 people. That was a full functioning hospital with patients, families, visitors, doctors, medical students who came every day to study, residents who came to work to treat patients and to continue to study and advance in their exams.
There is no independent journalism allowed in Gaza at this point, but there are international doctors. We've been there. We are the eyewitnesses to this genocide. We are telling the truth. And yes, IDF forces are lying to you. Innocent people are being killed in mass numbers, from paramedics to doctors and even children. Gaza currently has the highest amount of child amputees per capita in the world. This never happens. It does not happen unless you deliberately target innocent civilians.
I was in Gaza last year as a medical volunteer in primary care clinics in central Rafah, and I witnessed with my own eyes the impacts of forced starvation on the children I cared for. This is an entirely preventable famine imposed on the Palestinian people in Gaza by Israel and also its allies who are withholding life-saving food, water, and medical aid to an entire population under illegal occupation and blockade since 2007.
Imagine the level of courage you must have to put yourself on the line. Choose to go to Gaza, knowing that Israel is targeting hospitals, targeting medical facilities, targeting civilians. You put yourself on the line because you want to help the people suffering in Gaza. These doctors are heroes, and we should all know their names. So the ones that spoke at that press conference are Deirdre Noonan, Sarah Lalonde, Rizwan Minhas, and Yiping Ji. And there's a couple other speakers that I'm going to get to in a minute here. But it's hard to imagine. And it's worth noting the targeting of healthcare workers. So this is from the Toronto Star. At least up until now, the West has remained staunchly supportive of Israel. This has been the case despite statements from the UN, World Health Organization, human rights, and other international groups documenting Israel's killing of more than 1,400 healthcare workers and 180 journalists, as well as destroying 17 hospitals and 19 universities in Gaza. If you recall back, I think this is back in December 2013, there was a hospital that was hit by a rocket in Gaza. And there was this big debate over who did it. I mean, some debated it, I should be clear, in terms of mainstream press was debating this. And, maybe it was a rocket that backfired on Hamas, and it was a Hamas rocket that did it. Turns out, after further investigation, it was in fact Israel that did it. And that got a lot less play in the press, by the way, than the initial story of the debate over who did it. But since then, 16 more hospitals hit, destroyed. And we're still having conversations about, should there be sanctions? Should there be trade talks? Should Netanyahu be sent to prison? I don't. How is there any debate? It really is just wild how much pressure organizations that are associated with the Israeli government, how much pressure those organizations in countries like Canada, the US, the UK, Europe, how much power those organizations still have over our public policy, despite what we are seeing with our very eyes. Here's the next clip. This is a organizer that works to send medical supplies into Gaza, and her message directly to Mark Carney.
I urge our leaders, especially Prime Minister Mark Carney, to act in line with the message of his own book, published in 2021 called Values, Building a Better World for All. In it, he argues that we must place human dignity and shared moral commitments above markets, politics, and power. If our values mean anything, they must mean something now in Gaza. We therefore call on the Government of Canada to reject the militarized aid model, to restore full access to the UN and legitimate humanitarian organizations, to ensure aid is delivered safely, neutrally, and at scale, not through armed contractors, and to withhold Canadian funding from any entity that fails to meet these humanitarian principles. This is not only a test of Canadian policy, it is a test of our values.
So she mentions there the militarized aid model. This is what she is talking about. The new group that is being used to distribute aid to Palestinians is just a military contractor. New York Times here, new aid site in Gaza brings more scenes of chaos. The UN says food being distributed by a new Israeli-backed system is, quote, less than a drop in the ocean. And here's an image from one of those locations. People lining up in cages to receive, to hope to receive a tiny box of food, which many are not receiving. You have 2+ million people essentially living in an open-air prison where Israel controls the borders. The country that is destroying them, genociding them, controls what gets in. It is an insane scenario that we would not allow under any other situation. But for over a year now, we have allowed this to continue. And that, again, is in addition to, even before October 7th, the ongoing settlements and kind of control that Israel has had over Palestinians, both in the West Bank and Gaza, has been flagrant violations of international law that allies to Israel have continued to turn a blind eye to. But this new aid group is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I love how they name these things, describing it as a militarized distribution operation. So that's according to the UN, that violates humanitarian principles. So on Thursday, crowds of hungry Palestinians scrambled for handouts and dodged stun grenades that were fired outside the new aid hub to disperse crowds. That's according to videos that were verified by the New York Times. Shooting at people that are starving. Not really sure what else to add to that. Dozens injured by Israeli gunfire as crowds overwhelmed Gaza aid site. And of course, I mentioned this in a different video, but it's worth bringing up in the context of this. This is from Haaretz, an Israel-based newspaper. Netanyahu's Gaza aid U-turn isn't about compassion. It's about keeping the war going. Despite Netanyahu's approval of limited aid to Gaza under U.S. pressure, the plan's execution is raising alarms. And that, if you note, May 20th, before the headlines of what we are seeing now. I have, worth mentioning as well, just a Canadian charity has suspended their distribution of aid boxes to the Gaza Strip because they fear would not get to them because of who is now managing the whole process. I've one more clip to get to. I'm just going to end on this because I have nothing else to add, but it's worth hearing this.
One of the stories that stuck with us is a testimony from Dr. Mohammed Khuzaiz. He said, Do you know what a starving child looks like towards the end? They can't cry. Their heart slows down, and then it just stops giving up on the world. So I want to leave you with this image. Imagine children starving, unable to cry, and then completely slowing down and stopping because this world has let them down.